Welcome to my YouTube channel, Truth is Here. I'm Mubbina. I'm not going to do any elaborate introductions today. I'm really hoping to just give you a very quick overview of a previous video that I did. This one here, May 2018. Today is the 28th of May. Let's just have a look at that. And I uploaded this video on the 21st of May. Excuse me. As you can see, the video is about my personal details being adjusted, thus the expression reprofiling of Mubbina Hashmi. Just have a quick read of that extract there. Excuse me. It's my firm belief that the Royal Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain, hand in hand with the General Pharmaceutical Council, these organisations are the regulatory bodies of pharmacy and have been responsible, I firmly believe, for the adjustment of my personal details and the instructions that have been meted out to various individuals working for organisations who have been requested to speak at me rather than to me. I make reference to the smear nurse under instruction, who works for the GP practice where I'm registered as a patient, the lady who refused to understand what I was saying and kept on re-inviting me for a cervical screening process, which I'm not eligible for because I don't come under the criteria that is necessary for having a smear test. But she refuses to allow herself to understand what I'm saying to her, and that is, I have never had a sexual relationship before. I have never had sexual intercourse ever in my entire life, and she's still told me to come in. This has happened a second time when I've rang up the GP practice where I'm registered and spoken to the receptionist, who ignores everything I say and doesn't even want to put the information that I'm telling her onto the database, but she finally agrees, having stated again that I am sexually active, or words to that effect. That video is in preparation and you can listen to it soon. Not long now. I have prepared it, but I need to complete the whole entire video. Excuse me. So just have a look at that. Now I'm going to show you something, another piece of information, an email that was sent to me by a lady who was a fine arts expert living in the Bristol area, who I contacted a couple of years ago just to have some lessons with her. I'm not going to give you too much information about the lessons that I was having, but they were along the lines of the fine arts, and she's got in touch with me recently. Let me just show you. This is the email that she sent to me, the tutor that I've referred to, on the 25th of May this year. Today is the 28th, and my video was launched on the 21st. She says, let me just show you, I've covered that up. Hello, as you may know, new general data protection regulations come into effect as of today. Right, so let me just show you the next. Yes, I actually I took up these lessons with this lady who lives locally because I'd been through so much, and I've heard that the fine arts are very therapeutic when it comes to for individuals who've been through a lot of trauma in their lives and would like to resume a normal life. It's just one of those things that assists people and is known to assist people. On top of that, it was a hobby of mine anyway, something I'd like to do. This is the private policy. You can just have a quick look at that. what personal data is collected and why, and it mentions including relevant health problems. So your name, contact details and information relevant to sessions, including relevant health problems, will be collected. This is so that sessions can be appropriately to your needs and goals. This is the policy that has been passed. The relevance of the excuse me this video is that I draw your attention to the timing and the nature of my complaint, which is very serious. The fact that I've been monitored in this manner for so many years, and how I have really suffered as a result of it. The timing is worrying because of the nature of my complaint is that my data is being meddled with, and in an obvious way. And the establishments reserve the right to tread closely behind you and adjust the laws of this country as and when and how it suits them. This is really worrying. This is not the first time the Section 60 pharmacy order actually was implemented after the mechanisms and processes were already being implemented. We have 1998 to 1999, the year when I did my pre-registration training, and this is the year where they began harassing me, monitoring me unofficially. The things that took place in this year are shocking. Just to very briefly give you an idea, there was some kind of a rumour that my childhood medical notes had leaked. This was my understanding at the time because of the comments that were being made. There were a lot of sexual innuendos being thrown around, and I remember one comment to do with pornography. The pediatric tutor, who was very keen to have me as her student and had chosen me rather than I had chosen her, was once making a comment to do with the words I quote were taking photographs in compromised positions. Now this comment came in a particular context, and I think I was supposed to hear these words as well, and I was thinking along the right lines. I was banned from working in the paediatric ward, the special care baby unit ward. I'd been called a psychopath, for goodness sake, by more than one member of staff. And excuse me, interestingly, a knife was found stuck in the ward, in the door of the ward, that is, where she was herself based, the pediatric tutor. So that was very strange, to be called a psychopath and to have sexual innuendos being thrown around left, right and centre, and being basically not allowed to do practically most things that you should do in a hospital setting. Not being allowed near the ward was quite worrying for me as well. And then for a knife to be found in that door, which took to the ward, was frightening. And then a gun was found immediately below where I was living. The police were invited to investigate. A stocking was tied to my door handle and to the door handles of all the other females on that landing. Now, years down the line, many women have been murdered who share most of my details. Another woman has been charged with being an accomplice to 9/11, Dr. Afia Siddiqui, who is still being detained in Texas to this day, and her youngest child, her son, is missing. I was born on 9/11, and she and I have some very significant details in common. This is worrying. The marking of women with my details and my own personal marking took place in that District General Hospital in Carmarthen, West Welsh General Hospital, and had a a fair government been around, had we been treated fairly, had I been treated fairly, the investigation would not be banned, it would not be stopped by the establishments, by the mechanisms in place at the Royal Society and the General Pharmaceutical Council. Mr. Graham Seville Edwards, who I've mentioned previously, my former barrister, preliminary only, hasn't done anything. He hasn't commented upon these strange coincidences. Normally, chronology, such as the one I've mentioned, myself being targeted in that manner, and then women being murdered with all my details, and myself being treated in this horrendous fashion, this would be a major investigation, but nothing so far, and that's because they don't want to talk about it. They just want to carry on doing it. And it's only when people like myself stand up and do something or say something can I see something changing. And I hope yourselves, anyone else who's been affected by these processes, I hope you feel the same way, and you believe that it's time that something changed. Recently, a few months ago, and last year at the end of, what year was it? At the end of 2016, sorry. It's 2018 now, May. Earlier on this year, just before December, that's it, 2017, last year. We were running into January, but prior to that, at the end of December, I was told to get out of pill time pharmacy here in Avonmouth in Bristol, after I'd managed to make a major input into the company, who were really falling low in terms of standards. I was expected to dispense from boxes on the floor for several weeks, disorganized shelves which continually changed. For those of you not familiar with the world of pharmacy, dispensaries are supposed to be like dictionaries and highly organized places where people are able to find the medicines they're looking for and thus be able to dispense medicines with making no errors. Right, now if you make people work in an environment where everything is all over the place and you've got workmen carrying massive pieces of scaffolding left, right and centre whilst you're dispensing, and there are one drug kept in about 8 places, 8 locations, and everything's mixed up and jumbled on the floor as well, you can't expect a person who's worked for 4 years out of 20 to make no mistakes, whilst they are being expected to dispense on their own most of the time, an unlimited number of prescriptions. So I found that I was prone to making some errors. I'm working as a dispensing assistant, by the way, but my errors were nothing in comparison to the ones that I was picking up on. I picked up on out-of-date stock in the fridge. I picked up on the wrong dose for morphine sulfate for a patient. I mean, these are just 2 of many, and it was really stressful for myself to pick up on what were actually systematic errors and could easily be remedied, but the female pharmacist in charge did nothing from day one and brushed these very serious errors aside. Furthermore, the lady who was the inspector from the Royal Society and the General Pharmaceutical Council, who happened to come in whilst I was there to make that trip that they rarely make. Once in a year, I believe, they come in and they inspect the premises, and I happened to be around whilst they were doing this. This lady didn't bat an eyelid at the total chaos that was basically the environment in which I was having to work. A new member of staff, and I overheard her saying she didn't want me to carry on working there. And I also heard her saying, I'm sure I overheard her saying that the company should change their name, possibly because she realised I knew about all the substandards that were going on, and I hadn't played along with it. Most of the people there, in fact everyone there, plays along with it. Nobody says anything. The female in charge is too afraid, I believe, to do anything about it, as was the inspector from the society, another female. And I, just a dispensing assistant, came on my first day with a whole history of being monitored and bullied and harassed, and I refused to play along with them and give patients the wrong instructions on their medicines. Now, as I was continuing on in my employment, the few weeks I was there, things did improve, and they took my comments on board and made a difference. But as soon as they improved their standards, they told me to get out, telling me I had failed my probationary period, which was not the full probationary period, and this has happened to me before as well. They've chopped down the probationary period. Probationary periods are an initial period in which new employees are expected to be able to storm and eventually form, finding their feet and familiarizing themselves with the new environment and processes and people and all that side of things. I wasn't allowed to have my full probationary period, whilst I was actually doing a very reasonable job and working in an environment where I was exposed to total chaos, poor planning and organizing, new processes that I've never done before, so I had to learn those as well. I mean, it was horrendous, and at the same time remain assertive whilst you're being told it doesn't matter, and you know it does because you have a background in pharmacy. I have a background in pharmacy, and I know when something is wrong. And so I'm being told to just carry on. This was really traumatic for myself, very traumatic for myself. Similarly, the company that I worked for at the end of 2016 up until January 2017, a few weeks, if that, 2 weeks, it was about 2 weeks, Jute's Pharmacy here in Bristol, I was actually shouted at in their Filton branch, very, very badly shouted at by 2 members of staff. One, the pharmacist, she shouted at me so badly that people from outside came to see what was happening, people from outside the actual room of the pharmacy. But the reason being that I corrected a prescription and ensured that the patient received the right medicine. During the day I commented upon this intervention, and she screamed at me and said, if you'd never checked, you would never have known, i.e. you would never have known that the medicine was wrong. Next time, do as I tell you to do. In other words, you should leave the mistake and allow it to carry on. And that's how it should operate. Now, this is not correct. All members of staff are responsible for troubleshooting. And if you pick up on a mistake right at the beginning, be you a technician or an assistant, you are obliged to remedy it or alert the pharmacist, which is what I did, and it turned out to be a very positive intervention. The prescription was sent back to the general practitioner, who amended the prescription, and the patient received the right medicine. Rather than applauding me for this, she shouted at me. I texted her manager, who's the area manager, and told him about this incident. He came in and shouted at me and told me to get out. Now, both Pill Time and Jute's Pharmacy are probably looking back and thinking to themselves, because some of this is on CCTV camera, or perhaps all of it is, but I know some of it is on CCTV camera, and they may be looking back at it and thinking, oh my goodness, we shouldn't have done that. So to justify themselves, they may be desperately clawing for excuses and pretending that they have access to information. I've just shown you the data protection thing, the policy. They may be pretending that they think that I am dangerous and they wanted me off their premises, and I've got some history of, I don't know, child porn or paedophilia, going back to that pharmacist in West Wales General Hospital, who made certain comments about me, and her staff did as well, which really upset me. She wouldn't let me go to the wards, especially the paediatric ward. And then the knife was found there, and it's very coincidental that that should happen. And the marking of my door handle, and other females who have some proximity with myself Let me just show you something else now. I mentioned in one of my other videos, the video entitled Imam Mahdi in the Horizons, Essential Background. In this video, part 1, I mentioned that my niece has been targeted by Santander, who are a bank, or some kind of a bank, aren't they, in the Bristol area, nationwide in fact. And they played the broken record on my niece, who's now 18, for a record of 13 months, where they didn't allow her to open up an account. So I intervened. She and I went to the bank and spoke to the personnel there, and eventually she was able to have her bank account. This is unnecessary. It's known as red tape, and is really a method used to harass the family and coerce them into, I don't know, submitting to the whims of the establishments and some very guilty employers who have treated me so badly. Here in front of us we have a photograph of a flyer information leaflet from Santander. It looks totally normal for those of you who don't know what I'm about to tell you. Just have a look at that. Let me just tell you something. This young man on the front cover looks almost identical to my eldest brother's son. His style, his looks, there's only one difference, and that is something in his face. Okay, so I've mentioned my niece. Now this is my nephew. Anyone who sees my nephew will not be able to disagree. On the back we have a second young man. This young man looks 100% like my second brother's son. This young man looks slightly older perhaps, but has exactly the same face as my nephew. What this is, I don't know. It's an objective piece of information that any third party can scrutinize. I don't want you to be shadowing my poor nephews now to see whether they look like this, but trust me, they do. I am shocked, and I wonder where they're taking it. Perhaps the Royal Society and the General Pharmaceutical Council, i.e. the UK establishments, are collaborating with my family and trying to come up with some kind of a joint venture where they as you can see from these photographs, they are trying to get rid of me. In the words of Mr. Graham Sutherland, it's not in my family's interest to, certainly not in my parents' interest, to be known for being parents who may have abused their daughter. This was one of the comments that was being made by the paediatric pharmacist, pre-registration tutor. These comments stemmed from herself and her subordinate staff, and there was another principal pharmacist, her colleague, and of course the chief pharmacist who oversaw the whole thing. But it could well be that they don't want people to be angry with them now that we can trace back the deaths of women back to that district general hospital, especially that department, the pharmacy department. Personally, I believe it's the pharmacy department especially. And so they've said to my parents, somehow got in touch, I mean it's not difficult, we could do that, and said, why don't we get rid of Mubbina? You can place false allegations on her, that way you don't get defamed as being parents who may have abused her while she was young. This is the kind of things, the kind of information I was having to listen to. And I also got the message from a friend in London who'd overheard through the grapevine that my medical notes had leaked whilst I was doing my training. I hope you can see my concerns. This is objective information. My niece my two nephews, Santander, the medical notes. As you can see, the medical notes are an issue. The Section 60 Pharmacy Order article by Mr. Graham Seller Edwards talks of medical notes that can be accessed without any protection for the individual themselves, the individual concerned, i.e. myself. I'll stop there. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's much more to follow, and I hope to be preparing those videos. I hope you can appreciate I have to be very careful and give you information that is factual and evidence-based, and so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do my level best, really, to make sure you get the right information. Okay, so I'll stop there. Thank you for viewing my video. Please continue to look out for further videos on any topics. It's all relevant, trust me, and you will not be disappointed. Hopefully you'll be able to join the dots and see that I really am making sense. Thank you.